UFC Fight Night 185, aka UFC Vegas 19. We have Curtis Blaydes versus Derek Lewis. Definitely a great fight in the main event. Definitely a packed card with 15 fights. We're gonna, of course, let you know what we think. Boxing MMA picks as usual. I go by the name of Harris. I am joined with Zan, and again, we are giving you our picks for these UFC fights, starting with the prelims. We're gonna let you know which fights we feel are worth it, which fights you maybe want to avoid, which fights are good value, which fights are maybe overvalued. We got a lot of work to do. Pretty busy card, as I mentioned. I think the prelim has 9 fights in and of itself. So let's get right into it. Let's get into fight number 1. We have Sergey Spivak versus Jared Vanderaa. Looking at these two fighters, I mean, what I see from Spivak, of course, we know that he has that combat sambo style. We know that he's not the biggest in the division. He walks around at 240, as you can see. You could argue he should be a light heavyweight, just sort of based on his physique and his frame. But that being said, I like his striking. I think he has pretty serviceable stand up. I like his wrestling, chain wrestling, a lot of good takedowns. I've seen him turtle up a little bit against some bigger strikers, so it's going to be interesting to see how his striking defense holds up. But when I look at Jared Vanderaa, I mean, I see someone who's pretty big, but pretty slow. Pretty sturdy, pretty slow in his movement. He's pretty hittable. Definitely has a chin. And I've seen him go for takedowns, but that more so when he finds himself in situations where he kind of makes it dirty, clinching against the cage, dirty boxing, things like that. For this fight, I am going to have to trust the talent gap that I believe exists. I believe Sergey Spivak has a huge talent gap on Jared Vanderaa here. And I don't think size, as we can see with Jared Vanderaa, he's 240 himself. I don't think size is going to be a factor in this one. I think we see Sergey Spivak struggle with bigger fighters. So simply put, I'll keep this one short. I'm going to have to go with the fighter that I believe is more talented all around. I'm going to have to go with Sergey Spivak on this one. I see maybe a comfortable decision on points here.
Yeah, this is a fight that it's kind of the lower level heavyweights, right, in the UFC. But Jared definitely has the size. So with that size alone, a lot of times it comes with power. And when you're in this division, sometimes like the skills go out the window and it's just who lands first, right? So there's always that concern when you got the big guys fighting that you can do all the research, have the right pick, but then all of a sudden one shot lands and the fight's over. But I'm going to echo that. I'm going to go with Spivak as well. I like Spivak in this spot. He's fought the harder competition. He's been in there with heavy-handed guys. He's taken heavy-handed shots. And I think at some point he's going to be able to get the takedown. I think he should have better cardio. So yeah, I like Sergey in this spot, but I'm reluctant to go in heavy on this pick only because of the size Vanderaa has. And I've seen him lay guys out with that sloppy stand-up. So that's obviously possible when you're that big. But I'm going to go with Spivak as well to win that fight.
Yeah, and always a heavyweight beware. We have quite a few heavyweight fights on this card, and we always say here at Boxing MMA Picks, heavyweight fights especially, you have to be careful. I mean, you say it all the time. The more you go up in weight, the more the talent or the analysis can kind of go out the window. So be wary in picking Spivak here. He should win based on his talent, but again, Vanderaa does have some of that pop and some of that power, so be careful for that. In that case, let's move on to fight number 2. We have Aiemann Zahabi versus Drako Rodriguez. Why don't you go ahead and start this one off?
All right. So with Zahabi, obviously he's the brother of that coach out of TriStar, GSP's coach. So he's well-rounded. He has decent stand-up. He has pretty good stand-up. He has a good ground game. But in this fight, he's not to get the fight to the ground because he's going to be fighting a better striker. Drako Rodriguez was a boxer before he jumped to the UFC. He has decent takedown defense, and I don't think Zahabi's takedowns are that great. So I'm going to go with Rodriguez here to keep us on the feet, have the better stand-up, and he has some pop as well. So he can definitely hurt Zahabi at any point in this fight. So I like Drako to win that fight there.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. I mean, I think his stand-up, Drako Rodriguez, I think it's pretty solid. As you mentioned, has that pop. Good leg kick, too. And in terms of the ground game, I mean, not a black belt by any means, but he is a BJJ purple belt. So that does speak to having at least some IQ on the ground there in any sort of grappling situations. And it's interesting to note most of his wins are by submission, right? I mean, he had a triangle choke that he set up pretty beautifully on a Dana White Contender Series. So he seems to be pretty adept down there should it need to go there. But again, I mean, I think he has a striking advantage. I think with Zahabi, it's interesting because he has a bit of an unorthodox stand-up. It feels like it sort of lacks direction sometimes. And I mean, I don't really see enough from him, right? I don't see him throw enough. I don't see him be active enough. I don't see him particularly trying to win rounds. Whereas again, Rodriguez, he has that striking that's a little bit more crisp. I wish the odds were a little closer, but I do like Drako Rodriguez here at minus 190. So let's move on to fight number 3. In that case, we have Skelly versus Jamall Emmers. If I'm looking at this fight, I'm looking at obviously a matchup of styles here. You look at Skelly, he's a wrestler first. I mean, very demanding wrestling, chain wrestling. Definitely look for takedowns in sort of by any means necessary in some ways. You see him sort of maintain that top position, body locks, throws enough punches into ground and pound. He never really risks the ref standing it up, as an example. Pretty active on the ground, and I've seen him set up a few rear naked chokes, right? When it comes to his stand-up, I mean, it's okay. It's serviceable. He has a diverse range of strikes. Very hittable, though. And I want to see if that's going to be a key factor here. He's very hittable, doesn't have the most or the best head movement. And the moment you catch him, he's ready to brawl. So he's ready to kind of go for broke in that sense. So it's very possible to outstrike him. And I've seen him fade as the fight goes on. I mean, like I'm not going to say like a lot of wrestlers, but like some wrestlers, you see them with a lot of output in that first round, a lot of grappling, a lot of holding you on the ground, holding you against the cage. And then in the latter parts of the fight, they kind of fade. He still has that ability to wrestle later in the fights, but definitely on the feet, he slows down a lot. Jamall Emmers, I mean, he's faced some stiff competition, right? A split decision versus Giga Chikadze, for example. We know he's very explosive. We know he's dynamic in the stand-up, yet he's pretty composed. He's not wild at all. I like his movement. Mixes it up a lot. I've seen the following from him. I've seen switch kicks, jumping knees, calf kicks, head kicks, front of the feet to the knees, John Jones style, good clinch, knees to the body. I say all of that to say, again, I like how diverse his stand-up is. There's some things that I've seen from him in addition to, having a good jab as well, having quick, long hands. Undeniably, he's going to have the striking advantage in this fight. It's going to be a question of what can he do on the ground. And in terms of his accolades, he's a brown belt, right? So at least in terms of accolades, we know that he can do a little something on the ground, even if it's just from a grappling perspective. Nonetheless, I'm going to have to go with youth on this one. I'm going to have to go with size on this one. I'm going to have to go with stand-up skill. I think he looked really good in his last fight. I think his striking advantage might just be too much. But what I will sort of warn is that perhaps Skelly does have a path to victory here, and these odds might not be worth it, perhaps. But that said, I am still going to go with Jamall Emmers on this one. How do you feel?
Yeah, Skelly, I think his only way to win is if he catches a submission. I don't really think he has. I think it's a terrible matchup for him. He's fighting a wrestler that learned striking, and now Jamall Emmers, everyone believes he's a striker, but this guy is a wrestler first, and he has good wrestling, and he's gonna be the stronger guy, like physically stronger in the ring. Chaz is not in the best shape, but he's never in the best shape. He uses really good technique to get his positioning and leverage with the grappling. But in this fight, he's fighting a guy with these fast twitch muscles to avoid the grappling, push him off, and keep it striking. And in the striking, he has a big edge. Jamall has a huge edge. So I really like Jamall Emmers in this spot. I'm going to take him, and I'm really confident here. I think this is a terrible matchup for Skelly, fighting a fellow wrestler who has a way better stand-up. So I think Chaz's only way to win here is if he gets a choke or gets a submission somehow. I don't see him winning 3 rounds. I don't see him knocking out Emmers. So I like Jamall Emmers in this spot. He can win submission. He can knock him out. He can go decision. So I really like him in this spot, Jamall Emmers.
I like that you brought that up because I mean we see the striking stats. He is way in the lead, as we of course we would expect that. But to your point of him being a wrestler first, which I didn't even know that, 100% takedown defense. So that kind of tells you everything that you need to know about this fight, and that definitely boosts my confidence level in picking Jamall Emmers as well. In that case, let's move on to fight number 4. We have Shana Dobson versus Casey O'Neill. Casey O'Neill, she's making her UFC debut. She's undefeated, 5-0. Pretty good MMA striking. I mean, she trains out of Thailand, so that kind of tells you everything that you need to know in terms of her stand-up ability. Decent hands, decent kicks. Showed some wrestling in some fights, some footage that I've seen from her. Pretty good on top too. Smothers her opponent, has some good ground and pound, and she's very composed. I mean, she looks like a professional out there. She looks like she's ready for ready for some bigger moments, and obviously she's going to have the chance at that with her debut in the UFC. With Shana Dobson, I mean, she's coming off of a huge win for her. She was a plus 800 in her last fight, and she won via ground and pound. So she's definitely fired up. I mean, she showed some striking defense in that fight. She showed some wrestling in that fight. I mean, she's a striker first. Decent straight punches. She's decent on top. Good active control. I will say, for a fighter that has a 500 record with 4 wins and 4 losses, you can't really underestimate her. She does have, quite a bit that she has in her repertoire, quite a bit that she has in her skill set. But, I mean, O'Neill, I think, should take this one. I mean, she's younger. I think she has the better stand-up, despite Dobson being a striker. I think she has the ground game advantage as well. I do expect her to, although somewhat limited footage and no UFC experience, that could be a factor in this fight. I do expect her to be better everywhere. It's not guaranteed, but I do think that I feel okay with picking Casey O'Neill here, especially at minus 155. I think she presents some solid value.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that, but I'm a bit concerned with Casey O'Neill, whereas she hasn't really fought the best fighters. So when I'm watching her fight, she's showing me that she's well-rounded. She's able to do a bit of striking. I like her work on the ground when she gets on top, so that tells me that she does her grappling work. I think she's the more skilled fighter based on what I've seen, but again, I'm not seeing Casey fight. She hasn't fought any great fighters, any good fighters yet. And when I look at Dobson, I think she got that lucky win she won that fight against Agapova, but Agapova, like, she quit. Like, she gassed out. Like, she quit. Anyone would have won that fight. Because Agapova just gassed out. And obviously Dobson did a good job, like, in that fight to get her to gas out. But come on, the girl quit in that fight, gassed out, and Dobson won the fight. So Dobson rightfully deserves that win. But you got to really look at that fight that, yeah, Dobson won, but her opponent literally did not train cardio and quit in the ring and just gave up. So in this fight, how I see it going, I'm going to go with Casey O'Neill, even though I see she's fought the lesser competition. I've been peeping out her Instagram, peeping out what she's been doing. She has a good team around her. She's always training. She looks like she's taking this really serious, and I think she's the more well-rounded fighter here. I think she can beat her standing up. I think she can beat her on the ground. The only thing I'm worried about as well is Dobson. She usually has that physical advantage over a lot of these fighters. She's only 4-4, so it doesn't always help her. So she will be the stronger fighter here, but I can see Casey putting her hands on her. I can see Casey causing more damage, even winning a split decision or a unanimous decision. But I see this going the full 3 rounds because Dobson is tough. I don't think she'll quit. So I can see Casey O'Neill winning a decision.
Yeah, agreed. A good little side note there in terms of the fight going to decision. Maybe want to check what that's worth. Let's move on to fight number 5. In that case, we have Rafael Alves versus Patrick Sabatini. We have 2 UFC debuts. Why don't you take this one away?
All right. So with Rafael Alves, you're kind of getting like an Aldo type fighter with his striking. He throws heavy shots, leg kicks. He's very quick, very powerful. He's looking to hurt you. So he has really, really good striking. Like, he has good striking for a newcomer in the UFC. He has decent takedowns as well. He does lose his positioning when they scramble. So that's my concern, because right now he's going to be fighting Pat Sabatini, where Pat should lose this fight. But he's the type of fighter that can grind out a win. He's the type of fighter that can keep it close against the cage, somehow get the fight to the ground. And look at his record. He has a bunch of submissions, arm bars, rear naked chokes, heel hooks. So we're fighting 2 heel hooks on his record, right? So, and he gets a bunch of arm bars, Kimuras. Like, this guy is a submission machine. So you have to factor in that Alves could be winning the fight, and all Sabatini needs is that 1 round. He can wait till Alves is a bit tired, because he does gas as the fight goes, because he does throw a lot into his shots. And Sabatini can definitely win this fight. I think Sabatini is a super live underdog. I hear a lot of people high on Alves, and I get it. And a lot of people look at this fight as a lock. I don't think this is a lock. I'm gonna take Alves though. I think he should win this fight. Even though he's 19-9, he hasn't lost in like 5 years. Something changed. He turned the corner. I think his striking should be too much here. He should be able to put him away, but if he doesn't put him away, this fight can get interesting, because he's fighting a guy that just needs 1 submission to finish the fight, right? So, but I'm gonna go with Alves, because he has a more likely path to win versus Sabatini locking a submission somehow. So I'm gonna go with Alves here. I think his path to victory is he has a better chance than Sabatini. So I'm gonna go with him on that.
Agreed. Definitely agreed on that. I mean, they're both black belts. They both have, a number of submissions. You ask yourself, is that going to nullify? We know that Rafael has a lot of wins via knockout as well, whereas Pat Sabatini doesn't quite have that. So, I mean, that sort of statistic alone tells you that Rafael Alves does have sort of more paths to victory. Also, what's going to be interesting is that Pat Sabatini is taking this fight on 8 days' notice. We've seen some fighters, even some fighters that are on this card, that have taken fights on short notice, and compared to how they looked with a full camp, we know that they didn't quite look as good at all. So you kind of say to yourself, maybe Alves has the cardio edge, or maybe the fitness edge, as well as what we feel is the overall edge, despite Pat Sabatini definitely possessing that submission potential at any given time. So I'm going to echo that pick. I go with Rafael Alves as well, very much for the same reasons that you said. I like his stand-up. I like his sort of stock down stand-up. So, let's see how that one turns out. But again, careful on this one. Sabatini can win by sub, potentially. But Alves, I feel, is going to be the winner of this one. In that case, let's move on to fight number 6. We have Nate Landwehr versus Julian Erosa. Now, this one's an interesting one specifically. We know that Julian Erosa is coming off of a big win versus Sean Woodson. He was actually the biggest underdog on that card as well. I think he was a minus, I don't even remember, but he was the biggest underdog on that one. Good MMA stand-up, or decent MMA stand-up, I should say. He held his own on the feet and had effective moments versus Sean Woodson. I saw him control the center of the octagon primarily. I saw him mix in different strikes, spinning back fists, things like that. And you know what? He handled Sean Woodson's boxing. I like his style from a engaging perspective. We know that always works in the judge's eyes, or at least most of the time. And he comes forward a lot, right? He cuts the ring off, he cuts the distance off, he comes forward and kind of marches you down in some ways. From Nate Landwehr, I mean, we see kind of a solid stalking stand-up in his own right? I mean, decent boxing in his own right, decent counterpuncher in his own right, decent movement in and out of striking range, a lot of in and outs in his stance. Could use some better striking defense. I don't love his head movement. He doesn't really move in much. And we know he has the wrestling. Some good wrestling, good scrambling. Watch his fight versus Darren Elkins. We know Darren Elkins is a real good wrestler. Darren Elkins couldn't necessarily keep him on the ground. And he stuffed a few takedowns in that fight as well. I do assume, at least based on height and reach as well, I do assume that Julian Erosa will be the bigger fighter in here. I mean, he just looks physically like the bigger fighter. I think Landwehr, a big factor about him is that he slows down as the fight goes on. I think that could be a factor in this fight. That said, I do think Nate Landwehr has the better boxing. We know he's legitimate as a wrestler, and there's a lot of reasons to like Nate Landwehr in this fight. To me, it's a 50-50 fight. To me, I want to stay away from this if if I was actually betting on this. But if you're going to tell me to pick a winner on this one, my gut is going to have to go with Julian Erosa. And I think the later rounds are going to be the difference here. I mean, this one could potentially be split. But I do think that Landwehr might fade as this fight goes on, whereas I don't think Julian Erosa will fade as much. So very reluctant pick here, but I am going to go with Julian Erosa.
Yeah, this is a really, really, really super hard fight because you don't know what you're gonna get out of this guy, Nate Landwehr. He got knocked out by Gilbert Burns' brother Herbert, and then his next fight he beat Elkins in a really close fight. Some media outlets had Elkins winning that fight, some had him winning that fight. So it was a really close fight. So this to me is a hard fight because to me they both are not good fighters. So I'm not confident on this pick at all. I'm going to take Julian Erosa as well, just for the simple fact that I think this is going to be a striking fight. I know Nate has way more activity, but I think as the fight goes on, I think the reach, I think Julian, like he showed in his last fight, can hang in there. And then I think the reach is going to be a factor as the fight goes on. And I think Julian is technically the better striker, I think, technically. But I just think Nate has a bit more of a bully approach to it. He throws a lot of shots. He's always on the front foot. But Julian's good at moving around. Julian is really good. If you watch this fight in the Contender Series where he knocked out, I think the guy he's fighting tonight, the guy he knocked out, we just capped that fight. He knocked out Jamall Emmers on the Contender Series. And he was using good footwork and landed a really good kick, and bang, the fight was over, right? So I like him in this spot because I think Landwehr's a bit flat-footed, and I think Julian moves around the ring a bit better. He has a reach. I know Nate's going to be coming out first round like with a lot of shots coming, but I think as the fight goes on, he's going to slow down, and then the technique's going to show. Julian's going to still be there, and Julian has the kicks as well. So I like Julian in this spot. I think he's the better fighter in my opinion.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but tough, definitely a tough fight.
Yeah, because you got to look at Nate's style. So even if Julian is the better fighter, Nate rushes in, right? And he might not give the guy any space, right? So if Nate comes to play, he could win this fight. But I like Julian. I think he's gonna move around, and I think he's the better fighter. So I'm gonna take Julian here to win this.
I mean, this fight is a pick'em for a reason, right? So we're both going with Erosa on this one. There could be some good value there, but to your point, sometimes styles make matchups, and sometimes Nate Landwehr's style could be a style that ends up winning the fight. So we'll be very cautious of that. Let's see maybe how the weigh-in looks to see if we can maybe put a little bit more confidence into Julian Erosa. But as of now, a weary pick from both of us, but Julian Erosa is going to be the pick in that fight. Let's move on to fight number 7. Fight number 7, we have Eddie Wineland versus John Castañeda. Let's talk about Eddie Wineland for a bit. I mean, a somewhat awkward stand-up. He keeps his hands low, comes forward often, kind of looks like a very old school fighter. I don't know if it's the mustache or if it's his stand-up style or maybe both, but definitely has an old school feel to him. He wants to make it scrappy, almost wants to brawl in some ways. Herky-jerky type of stand-up. Sometimes it's effective, right? I mean, sometimes opponents can't really catch the timing of that. And that's key. That's a key element because he puts 100% power into it, right? I mean, most of his wins are by knockout. I think of his 24 wins, I think 14 of them are by knockout. So he definitely is going to be looking for that. And he's going to want to keep the fight on the feet. I mean, I haven't really seen him try to take it to the ground and really just tries to keep it on the feet, looks to land that knockout and kind of win from there. When I look at John Castañeda, I mean, I see somebody who is definitely much more technically sound. He's a southpaw, had a very competitive debut versus Nathaniel Wood, and we know Nathaniel Wood to be pretty decent all around. I like his stand-up, good in-and-out movement, good low kicks, good tie kicks, good boxing, good counter-punching. And, I mean, at times, has a bit of a stalking stand-up in his own right. But, for the most part, he keeps a pretty healthy distance from his opponent. I'll keep it short by saying this. If we're talking skill, I think John Castañeda should win. Both fighters are 1-3, and you're going to have to kind of ask yourself who's going to be hungrier. You always want to assume it's going to be the younger fighter, but you really never know, right? I mean, I'm going to sort of bank on John Castañeda being the hungrier fighter. But I mean, again, 29 versus 36 years old. Let's see what happens there. I think the diversity to John Castañeda's stand up, I should say, I think that's going to be the difference. I mean, I think it's going to be key to see how Castañeda takes Wineland's power. Can he take a shot? Can he handle that kind of brawling style that Wineland wants to sometimes do? If he can, then I feel really good about John Castañeda in this. But if he can't, then of course we know that Wineland very much has the ability to hurt him, right? I think otherwise, if Wineland doesn't win by hurting him or by knockout or by TKO, I definitely think that John Castañeda has the ability to rack up points almost everywhere else in this fight. For that reason, I actually do like the odds being so close on this one because I think that's a pretty fair representation. But at minus 125, somewhat of a reluctant pick, but I will say decent value. I'm going with John Castañeda on this one.
Yeah, definitely. I understand why. The UFC, though, I think wants John to win this fight. He's 29 years old. Eddie is kind of on his way out. He's 36. Age is undefeated, right? So the thing is, 7 of Wineland's last 8 wins have come by KO, right? So that's a concern. So we know that Wineland can knock you out, and he has shown power. And in this fight, I think he's gonna have the boxing advantage. But I think John has more of a diverse striking game versus Eddie, but I think Eddie has a good advantage in the boxing. But I think the difference here is John's gonna have that, or I think John's gonna have to fall back on his pedigree, his wrestling. He actually, I don't have it in front of me, but I already was doing my research on this guy and actually doing my research when he fought that other fight. What's his name? Nathan? What's his name? Wood? Nathaniel Wood?
Yeah, Nathaniel Wood.
That fight. So I remember from that fight, and when I was studying that fight, I was thinking the only way this guy's going to beat Nathaniel Wood is if he utilizes this wrestling I keep hearing about and I read about, that he has wrestling. So he either went to college for it or something. So he has wrestling. So I remembered that. And in this fight, it's not Nathaniel Wood. So I think he's going to be able to get the takedowns. At 36 years old, Eddie's not the same guy. And I think that's what he needs to do to win this fight. If he goes for takedowns, I think the odds should be spread way more apart. It's just that we don't know if he's going to utilize the takedowns. But if he does, I think he's going to win this fight easily. But if he doesn't, I still think he can win this fight on the feet because he has a more diverse striking game. So the fact he has more paths here, I'm going to take him. UFC wants him to win as well. So I'm going to go John Castañeda to win this fight. And he mixes it up. He wins by knockout, submissions, decisions. So he's been around the block, right? So I'm going to go with John here.
Yeah, I really, again, just to say that again, I really like the value at minus 125 here. Granted, he does not get knocked out. Obviously, that's easier said than done in some ways versus Eddie Wineland. But like I said, I mean, I like Castañeda's ability to rack up points everywhere else in this fight other than avoiding getting hurt and avoiding getting knocked out. So in that case, let's move on to fight number 8. We have Drakkar Klose versus Luis Pena. I mean, we know Luis Pena somewhat at this point. I mean, his stand-up is serviceable, decent, I would say. But, I mean, we've seen some fighters kind of expose him on the feet. Commer Worthy comes to mind. Not much head movement, pretty predictable stand-up as well. Kind of shows the jab more so for range than anything. Kind of throws one strike at a time sometimes. He incorporates kicks a lot in his stand-up. But again, oftentimes it almost seems like he's doesn't turn it up the way that he needs to. Sometimes he just kind of shows these strikes rather than really putting anything behind it. But we know his game is a grappling game, right? I mean, he uses his length, he uses, body locks and locking onto different body parts to land a submission, land a ground and pound, relentless on the ground in some ways. But we know that, or as we've heard in some of his fights, it's position over submission. He's really just going to look to get better position on you, sort of tap away at you, control you for 3 rounds, and look to win sort of in that way. What's interesting is we're going to see what happens versus Drakkar Klose. I've seen him give up takedowns. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor here is that I've seen him give up a lot of takedowns. So that could be an immediate path for Luis Pena here. But when it comes to his stand-up, he throws a lot into it. He has a big right hand. Not the most technically sound in my opinion, but definitely has a lot of pop on his punches. And he kind of stays in the center of the octagon. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Is Luis Pena going to fight at distance and fight going around the cage? Or is he going to sort of fall into the trap and brawl in the middle with Drakkar Klose? We're going to have to see how Klose nullifies Pena's strengths. Like I said, I've seen Klose get taken down many times. That concerns me in terms of Luis Pena being able to do that, especially with that being a strength of Luis Pena. But at the same time, we've seen guys beat Pena by having better stand-up. And I believe Drakkar Klose, albeit maybe not as technical, I think he does have the better stand-up in this fight. It's going to be a question also of what does Luis Pena offer at this level? A very hot prospect. I don't want to say once upon a time because this kind of is a prospect from that perspective. But we've started to see him face, opponents that are a little bit more quality, and he doesn't quite look as good in these fights. So we really have to ask ourselves, what level is Luis Pena? Is he somebody that is going to be a serious contender at some point in time? Or is he just kind of this, middle of the pack? It's gonna be interesting though, to see how this turns out. I really want no parts of this fight at all. I'm not betting on this. I wouldn't suggest anyone bet on this unless you feel a lot differently than I feel on this one. But if you're gonna ask me to make a pick, you put a gun to my head, I'm gonna have to reluctantly go with the underdog pick, Luis Pena. I think that he has maybe slightly more tools. You have to think about the ground game advantage that he has. And I mean, he's taken on bigger punchers, right? I mean, we saw him take on Kama Worthy again as an example. Can he take the punch that Drakkar Klose has to offer? We'll see. If he can, I think he has some tools and somewhat of a path to win this fight. So again, reluctant pick, put a gun to my head. I'm going to go with the underdog Luis Pena on this one. But it's tough. I want to stay away from this completely.
Are you serious? I think this is one of the easier fights on the card. And I'll tell you why.
I need to hear this. Go ahead, please.
Luis Pena. Okay, first of all, his name is Luis Pena. This is the same guy. This is the same guy that lost to Mike Trizano. Okay, not saying, but come on, he lost to Mike Trizano. He lost to Matt Frivola, and he lost to Kama Worthy. His only wins in the UFC: Steve Garcia, Matt Wineland, who's like 50, and Steven Peterson. Like, come on, this guy is a big letdown. Dana White thought he was going to be something else. I did too. And he totally flopped. I think this is his last fight in the UFC. I think after he loses this fight, with all the cuts going down, Luis Pena is going to be going to Bellator. I think this is a terrible fight for him. Look who Drakkar Klose has beat. Okay? Lando Venata. Hold on. Mark Diakiese, Lando Venata, Bobby Green, Christos Giagos. And he lost to striker David Timur, and he lost to striker and grappler Beneil Dariush, right? No fault to losing to Beneil. But come on, if Luis fought those guys, he probably wouldn't have a single win in the UFC. He probably wouldn't even have a win, right? So I think Easy, I think Lando, I think Bob, I think Chris, I think Giagos, I think all of them would give Pena a handful. So honestly, I get what you're saying. I get it. But trust me on this one. Drakkar Klose is almost a guaranteed pick here, because the only way I think he loses if he gets trapped in submission is the only way. Because I think Drakkar Klose has the better wrestling. Because he's going to be stronger. He's going to be able to just lift him up in the air and just like slam him down like Matt Hughes. Like he's done that to people. He picked up people like that. And he's going to be able to do that to Luis Pena. And then I think he has the boxing advantage. And what gives him the boxing advantage is his pressure fighting. He's going to be marching this Pena guy down. Pena's going to have to dig those calf kicks. He's going to have to use his length, and he's going to have to fight smart for the whole fight. I don't think that's going to happen. So that's why I got Drakkar Klose. Again, Pena could win if he fights different than what we have seen. He has to improve. He has to he has to get better. He has to have a game plan. He can't just wing it like the Kama Worthy fight or the Frivola fight. He has to know his path to victory. And in this fight, he has to keep using his height. He has to use his reach, chop the legs down, or like you said, get the takedown and take him down. But if you let this guy march you down, have you backed up against the cage with his boxing ability and pressure and his fearless way of fighting, I think Pena's in trouble, man. I think this is a big step down for Drakkar and a big step up for Luis Pena as far as who they've been fighting. So yeah, I like Drakkar. I really like Drakkar close, and I'm surprised Vegas blessed the odds the way they did. So I'm gonna go with Drakkar close. But again, UFC, anything can happen, man. You never know, man. Harris, anything can happen.
I'm rolling. I like the confidence in Drakkar close on this one. Let's see how this one turns out. I mean, if it goes the way that your analysis says, I mean, minus 180 seems like some pretty good value. So let's see how that one turns out. I do agree wholeheartedly that step down for close, huge step up for Pena. Let's see what happens in that one. So let's move on to our final fight of the prelims. We have Jared Gordon versus Danny Chavez. Why don't you do the honors of starting the analysis on this one?
All right, I think we got a real good fight. It's a real clash of styles. Jared Gordon, I think his path to victory here, he's going to have to get the guy he's going to have to get him to the ground. He's going to have to utilize his wrestling, utilize his wrestling game and keep him down there, get a submission or ride this out for 3 rounds. But we've seen some fights where Jared Gordon, his cardio definitely goes down a lot as the fight goes on. This is one of the hardest fights for me to decide. Because you look at Danny Chavez, he's lethal. He's vicious. This guy throws leg kicks. This guy throws. He has really good leg kicks. He has probably top 5 leg kicks in the UFC. And a lot of people don't really know that because they haven't really seen his fights, right? But this guy is a really good striker. I think this stays in the striking range. He destroys Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon definitely can get this to the ground. But I'm gonna lean towards the side where Chavez keeps this up long enough, hurts him. I think he just needs 5 leg kicks, and he's gonna compromise Gordon. And even if he doesn't, I think he's gonna be able to knock him out and keep the fight on the feet, just like he did with T.J. Brown, who always gets the fights to the ground and he has success that way. He wasn't able to get that against Chavez. Chavez has quick reflexes. When you try to wrap him, he's quick to just pull the underhooks right under you. Like, he's quick with it. So he definitely knows the ground is not where he wants to be, and he does whatever it is to stay out of that area. So I like Danny Chavez here. I love the odds on this fight. I think Danny Chavez is going to get this done here. I think he's going to be too good striking, and I think this is going to be on the feet. I think he can get a knockout in this fight.
Yeah, I completely agree with this one. I love Danny Chavez in this one. I love the odds at minus 135. The biggest thing that stood out for me was how quick or how much quicker Danny Chavez is than Jared Gordon. I think Jared Gordon is pretty slow in my opinion. Whereas Danny Chavez, I mean, quick strikes, quick kicks, quick spin kicks. The hands are powerful. We've seen Charles Oliveira knock out Jared Gordon. So, that kind of that always naturally makes the chin suspect, especially against a big hitter like Danny Chavez, or I should say a quick, accurate hitter like Danny Chavez. I like him here in this one. I won't keep this one too long at all. I think the calf kicks will add up, to your point, 5, maybe less, before that leg is compromised. And if that leg is compromised, there goes the wrestling, or at least there goes the attempts for the shoots and the attempts for the wrestling and to take it on the ground. So I think I like Chavez's path to victory here. I think he's going to be quicker. I think he's going to be much better on the feet. I love the odds on this one. And I think as the fight goes on, not only with Jared Gordon slowing down, but also with Danny Chavez landing more and more strikes on the leg, I see Danny Chavez kind of cruising here potentially in this fight. So I like the odds at minus 135. I like Danny Chavez as well in this one. So let's kind of stamp that in as our pick. In that case, let's take it to Vegas. Let's see what we're dealing with. Let me uncheck all of these first. Let's give them. Do you have an underdog pick?
Okay, go up and down. Let me see.
Prelim.
the most likely underdog on that prelim?
Yep.
Okay. Let me check. You go first. Let me see. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I'll buy some time for you. Shoot. I mean, for me, I was gonna say Pena. I mean, that was my sort of original which dog has the best opportunity type of pick. In
Mhm.
some ways, I still believe in that because again, I don't love Drakkar's close takedown defense at all. I think he just allows it to happen way too much. And if Pena can show any level of control on the ground, he can maybe win 2 rounds out of that. Or I'm gonna have to count the pick'em, man. I'm gonna have to count the pick'em. I'm gonna have to go Julian Erosa. Tough fight, but I kind of like the tools that Erosa possesses in this one, as opposed to Landwehr. So let me maybe mark Julian Erosa as my underdog pick, even though it's a pick'em fight.
All right. I echo Julian Rose. I think that's a good pick there as the underdog. And I know I won't John Castañeda, but as I indicated, Eddie Wineland, I think he might leave the UFC with a bang, right? So again, if he loses, he's probably going to put down his gloves and retire, right? So, but I think Eddie Wineland definitely has a path with his boxing. If this fight stays standing, he definitely can knock John Castañeda out if he lands. So I think that's an underdog that if you're searching for an underdog, that's one to look at there.
This is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to say the least. Again, 9 fights on the prelim, pretty busy prelim. A lot of fights for you guys to choose from. As usual, let us know how you feel in the comments. I mean, let us know if you agree with our picks. Let us know if, who's your underdog pick.
Oh, another one,
Hold
another
on.
one, another one. Sorry, another one. Sorry to cut. I know what you're doing your
Go
thing,
ahead. No,
man.
go ahead.
Jared, like based on the odds, like this, sometimes you gotta look at the odds when you're making the picks, right? So Jared Vanderaa, 265 pounds versus 240-pound heavyweight. He's gonna be the bigger guy. He can land that bomb. So if we're talking underdog picks, we can't ignore the physical advantages he has. He's new to the UFC, so he likely loses, but based on those odds, definitely it's worth a stab if you want to take a shot at an underdog.
And I guess I forgot to ask, do we have either a prelim parlay or sort of one pick that we like on the undercard, or maybe a couple picks that we like on the undercard?
Yeah, I like Drakkar Klose. I like him parlay with Jamall Emmers. And I'm gonna throw in there. Oh man, I'm gonna go Danny Chavez. I really like him here. Actually, I like Danny Chavez. That should be a healthy parlay. That should pay good.
Yeah, that's a pretty healthy paying one. That's plus 292. $100 will return $392 on that one. If I were to keep it maybe a bit more conservative, I would just simply take Drakkar Klose off of that, and I would rock with these 2 fights, Jamall Emmers as well as Danny Chavez, plus 149 there. So $100 is going to return $249. Still a pretty healthy return, only taking a look at 2 fights. Now, as I was saying, 9 fights on the prelim, a lot of fights to go through, a lot of potential value on this card, a lot of tricky fights on this card as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these prelim fights turn out. But again, as usual, let us know how you feel in the comments. Let us know who's your underdog pick, who are your confident picks, which picks of ours do you agree with, which picks of ours do you disagree with. All of that good stuff, like, rate, comment, and subscribe, share with anyone that you know that needs some additional UFC analysis and UFC advice. As usual, boxing MMA picks. I go by the name of Harris. I am joined with Zan, UFC Fight Night 185. Let's make this money.
Let's get it.